Okay, well, hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking here. We are currently in the middle of a massive ice storm up here in west central Pennsylvania. If you don't believe me, let's go outside to our weather correspondent, me, to see what's going on out there. Hey Tekking, how you doing? I'm being pelted by ice right now! Yay, winter! That is fantabulous. Alright, so, I haven't talked about My Hero Academia in a while, and I thought about, okay, what character am I going to discuss? And the answer presented itself in the form of a t-shirt that I bought at a comic convention 2 months ago and haven't worn yet. This is cool. So you got All For One on the front, but check this out. I didn't even find this out until just now. Bam! Symbol of evil! That's awesome, right? That is pretty cool. More shirts need to have kanji on the back of it. Alright, so we're not going to be talking directly about All For One, the character. Feel free to build as much fan fiction as you want on his birth and his upbringing and how he discovered his quirk and his relationship with his brother and how he became the basically lord of, quirk rebellion during the time when the quirks began to, take over the world, and there was a lot of prejudice to people that had quirks and kind of divided society. A lot of interesting stories there, I'm sure, that Horikoshi's going to get to. Now, we're going to talk more about the relationship between All For One and Tomura and how it parallels, how this is like a perfect mirror from All Might and Izuku. Now, I love this. It's kind of a cliche, and it's used a lot in manga, but I do enjoy it. I love the idea of passing the torch. Now, it's taken kind of literally in My Hero Academia with, like, the very first episode when All Might explains, the concept of one for all, kind of like passing the torch. In fact, I think he uses that exact terminology. It passes to the next, powers up, flame gets stronger, and, of course, one for all is analogous with the flame. That's always used, even up until All Might's fight with All For One. The flame was, like, symbolic. It was more than symbolic at that point. It really did seem like the flame itself was the source of his powers, and it flared up one last time for that final blow. But certainly passing the torch, not just literally, figuratively here, has a lot of meanings, okay? Probably the best one is in Naruto that I remember, where you have the Sannin that, worked together and then they kind of separated, but then they began to train each of the next generation up, Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura, and then later on with Naruto and Sasuke, they're the reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, these two brothers that fought each other, and then they died, and then they reincarnated, and the reincarnates fought each other, and then they died, and the cycle continues and continues. I like that type of shit. I don't know about you, but I just like it. Like, oh, this is an endless cycle, and of course, when the cycle gets broken, when it gets smashed, that's an interesting story, okay? So not maybe so much. If this was just an ordinary case of, like, okay, you have All For One and you have All Might, right? All Might is, of course, the embodiment of All For One's brother that began One For All, and he's passing it on, and then they had their epic battle, and now it looks like what's going to happen is that Izuku, of course, he already has One For All, he's going to build it up, and then you have Tomura, who we don't know yet, but it's very highly implied with the state that All For One is in right now. Although I have to give it to the guy. He still has a sense of fashion, okay? The dude had pretty much his entire face just obliterated by All Might. He doesn't have eyes. He doesn't really even have a nose or ears or anything. All he's really got is his mouth. He can't even really breathe on his own, honestly, and yet he still rocks the suit. He could still strike imposingness to the entire, world whenever he shows up. It's very rare whenever he shows up, but when he does, man, he expresses that just palpable, like, evil in the atmosphere, to the point where when Izuku and Momo and Ida and Kirishima were going to rescue Bakugo, I don't even think they met him with, like, they actually saw him. They were hiding behind that wall. And just his presence alone, he wasn't even doing anything. He doesn't even know they were there. Just his mere presence and his badass theme music playing in the background, which I guess he's a fan of, like, old school opera, whatever. That was enough to make visibly ill, to the point where Izuku's like, I'm gonna puke, oh my god, that guy is, like, evil times 1,000. Like, what the hell, man? So he has a presence, right? So I don't like to think his point in the story is exactly done yet. I don't like he's like, okay, he had his moment, he fought All Might, United States of Smash, that's really cool. You could say that he's just going to figure out a way to pass on his powers to Tomura, and then he's just going to disappear. Now, this mirrors the passing of the power on to Izuku from All Might, of course, it's pretty obvious. However, there's a distinct difference here that All For One brings up when All Might and him are in the interrogation room and they're talking about this. He brings up, he's like, your student, All Might, this Izuku, you still are training him, and you still have him on a leash, so to speak. But my student, Tomura, he's already grown up. He's already, out on his own, doing his own thing, and I trust him with that. Okay, so kind of implying to like, yeah, we both have students that we're gonna pass our powers on to, but I just did it better. I raised him up psychologically to the point where he's ready for this. So, I don't think All For One is just gonna rot in prison for the rest of the series, and Tartaros, no. There's definitely gonna be something going on here, because whenever you get introduced to a prison in a series, and they go through so many lengths of how indestructible and how impenetrable this prison is, and how, like, it's the best security in the entire world, and he's in a prison cell that's like 5 feet of steel and concrete, and he's way underground, and he's got laser sights and gun turrets trained on him 24/7, and if he even thinks about activating his quirk, he just gets riddled full of bullets. They go through the trouble of talking about how secure that facility is. All I'm doing is sitting there reading that, and I'm like, okay. So that just makes it more intense when the breakout occurs, like maybe not when he breaks out, but when someone breaks in to rescue him, or the prisoners revolt, because Stain is in there too, and I don't think Stain's part of the story is exactly just over and done with, okay? I think Stain's gonna be coming back as well as with All For One, okay? But the question is, when All For One does get out of there, because I think that's going to happen at some point, is he going to continue, being the boss of the organization? Is he going to try to fight All Might again? Is he going to try to take on Izuku directly? Or is it going to be the case where he realizes that he's at the end of his road, he can't really go much further? That United States of Smash seriously messed him up, because from what we've seen when he was, like, in this state, he was pretty sorry looking. He had to cover his, head with that mask, which I'm sure probably had some type of life support thing. He was connected to those, IVs whenever we saw him communicating with Tomura there. So he was obviously not in a good condition. But ever since his fight with All Might at Kamino, we have not seen him like standing on his own or anything. He's always, now granted, he's in prison, sure, but that's my point. Like, we're not sure. We don't know. He's in that wheelchair and he's hooked up to a respirator and everything, and it's just like, is he even capable of surviving on his own? Like, even if the League of Villains breaks into Tartaros, they cause a massive riot, all the prisoners are free, Stain's going around like, and they manage to get him out of there, they realize, oh crap, we can't even take him out of this chair because he's hooked up to all this life support, and if we take him off, he's gonna die immediately. I like to think that one of the quirks that All For One stole in his exploits of being the best villain ever, he stole a hyper-accelerated healing quirk. Okay, but it's not like magic healing. It's not like healing like you get your arm lopped off in like Toriko and you can just, oh, your cell's activated. I grew a new arm. That's pretty cool. Try this out tonight. It's nothing like that. It's like a hyper regeneration quirk in the sense of like, if you get cut, the cut will heal normally. So there might very well be a scar. In All For One's case, 6 years ago when he got the ever-loving stuffing pounded out of him by All Might, he really got wrecked, and his face was just in like a mangled position. It wouldn't even, probably just a pile of jelly and goo. But thanks to this quirk, he was able to heal quickly, but it's like he gets both of his eyes pounded out and his nose completely shattered into oblivion and everything. Like, your body isn't capable of regenerating your eyes or building your skeleton back up, so those parts are just gone. So that's why, 90% of his head is just covered with scar tissue, because All Might, I'm imagining, this isn't very hero-like, but it's the symbol of evil, so you can kind of take some liberties with this. I'm imagining this first fight with All Might, and it's pretty rough on All Might too. He took some serious injuries as well. That was the whole point of him suffering that major injury. But I'm imagining at the end of the fight, All Might just has All For One up against a wall, and he's just like, why won't you just already? You know, just like he's thinking of Shimura and all the things, all the trouble this guy's caused, and he's just pounding his head into the side of this wall, and after he collapses, and then it regenerates into what you see in the current situation, which would also explain why All For One is so keen on messing with All Might psychologically during their battle. He brings up Shimura. He mentions, oh, guess what, All Might? My apprentice Tomura, the leader of the League of Villains, my successor. He's Shimura Nana's grandson. Oh, you know that's just gonna stick in. And then he does the whole thing with, like, he doesn't even really have a proper mouth, but he's like, smile, All Might. You know, like, so you feel like, okay, yeah, this is for pounding my face in. Do you think I like my face resembling a freaking, I don't even know what you would use to, like, your knee? You know, imagine your knee if it gets all scraped up and it's covered in, like, scabs and shit. That's what his head looks like. So, it's more of like, even if I can't pound you into the ground physically, I'm gonna try, but I'm just gonna mess with you psychologically. Okay. So, very likely that's not going to be the situation. He won't be able to continue his villainous activities. So I think, if nothing else, League of Villains, let's say they rescue him. At that point, you know, Tomura's probably going to be like, Master, we saved you! Now you can guide us! And All For One is like, Tomura, I cannot guide you anymore. I can do only one thing. My body is wrecked. All Might destroyed me. It's all because of All Might, Tomura. It's all because of All Might, and it's all because of his apprentice, that stupid Izuku. That's the reason everything got screwed over. We could be ruling the world right now if it wasn't for them. We could have, you know, realized our dream, but it all failed. And now look at me. I'm in this pathetic body. I cannot live if I'm not, you know, hooked up to life support anymore. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all my quirks, my boy. I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to have to, you know, figure out how they work. Because most likely, unlike the transfer of One For All, you know, it doesn't kill the person that had it previously. And even right now, when All Might doesn't have the power anymore, he doesn't immediately drop dead. But the situation with All For One is a little different, because he has all these quirks inside of him, many of which are probably keeping him alive. On top of the life support, you know, he needs to have his quirks. One such quirk, All Might hypothesized, is an anti-aging quirk, or some quirk that allows you to at least extend your life force a little longer than a natural human. Because otherwise, this dude should be, like, well over 100 years old right now, and, you know, there are people that are able to live that long, but are there people that are able to live over the age of 100 and still have an epic battle with the strongest hero in the world? You know what I mean? So, if he just takes all these quirks out and gives them over to Tomura, I'm sure he can do that, because we've seen him do that before. He's basically just a junction point for quirks. He can absorb a quirk, give it to somebody else, or he can steal them, and he's a mediator there. Now, granted, I don't think we've ever seen him give more than one quirk to one person. I might be wrong on that. We might have seen that, but we've seen him do, like, that example we saw in Izuku's flashback, you know, when he was inside of his inner world, and he's like, oh, you have one guy that doesn't have a quirk, but wants one for revenge. Then you have this other guy who has, like, spikes all over his body who doesn't want his quirk because he just wants to be normal. No, you see what All For One does. He takes out the quirk of the spiky kid, and, you know, he turns back into normal, and he transfers it over to the other guy that didn't have a quirk. He now has one. But what I'm saying is, I don't think we've ever seen him take, like, alright, I'm gonna take 4 of the quirks I have, like, airwalk, and gigantification, and enhanced strength, and the steel bone rivets, or whatever. I'm just gonna give all 4 of these to you. Take them, Mr. Compress. We've never seen him work like that, but he might be able to do that, but there might be a risk involved. The risk being he loses his life, which, at this point, I mean, he's kind of already teetering on the end of it, I would say. So, he might just realize, like, there's no point anymore. Like, you know, if I did this, if I just transferred all of my quirks out at once, I would die immediately. But who cares at this point? I'm in a freaking wheelchair. I can't move. I'm hooked up to all this crap. All might beat the crap out of me a second time. You know what? All I have right now is you, Tomura. You are my legacy. So take it, go, and defeat them. Now, let's talk about the sad part of this story, which is going to be what I think the inevitable death of All Might. This has been brought up a lot, and it's, like, brought up to the point where some people are very divided on it. They're like, well, All Might doesn't have to die, does he? Well, no, but poetry, like, oh, both of their masters die, and then Tomura and Izuku are the next in the line of, they're the next link in that vicious circle. And they face off against each other, and they're either going to be the ones to finish, like there's going to be a victor finally in this fight, or it's just going to continue down the line even more. Now, I like to think that that's not going to happen. I hope that it's not the same gist with All for One and All Might again, where it's like Tomura and Izuku fight it out, and this continues on for years, and they eventually get to the point where Izuku's like, alright, I'm pretty banged up, and Tomura's like, yeah, I am too, so we have to pass on our powers to the next generation and hope they finish it off. I hope that's not the case. But, if All Might were to die, and then All for One were to die, that would at least, that would give them both, like, the most height of motivation for doing what they're gonna do. And it might not end the way you think. Tomura could be motivated by the death of All for One because it's like, he was his master. He was his father figure, really, since, like, day one. Granted, there's still gaps of Tomura's past we don't really know about. He might not really have that many memories of Nana because, she didn't want him to be involved in this. So, maybe when he was really, really young, but memories that he doesn't really have anymore. So the case with All for One being his father and him talking it up like, oh, that's a good thing. I've raised him this way. That might actually backfire on him. That might be like, oh, okay, well, now that he's gone, I'm just this raging ocean of rage, just blind rage because my master is dead. And Izuku, if All Might were to die, of course, Izuku would be filled with rage and sadness and all that as well, but I don't think he would get lost in it the same way that Tomura would, because Tomura's already kind of unstable. Strike the kinda, he's really unstable. You know what I mean? So it's like, I could see him just going straight up chaotic evil and just like, screw this! I'm just gonna wipe out everybody! Using all the powers that my master gave me. And then Izuku, after the death of All Might, he'd be like, but he'd like remember the spirit of All Might. And of course, here's the thing, All Might's not really dead because he still has his quirk inside of him, and we've seen All Might in the visage, in the embers of One for All. And maybe the reason he hasn't really appeared and talked to him in his inner world is because he's still alive in this one. Now, you could say maybe the same thing works for All for One. Maybe AFO would retain his being inside of Tomura, but I don't know if that's exactly how it works there, because they're similar quirks, and, All for One is the basis for One for All. It's like the split quirk thing there. So it's likely that he might continue on, and there might be a little spirit version of AFO inside of Tomura. But I'm just saying, like, after the immediate death of him, yeah, Tomura would be way more subjected to just blind rage and just wipe everybody out than Izuku would be. Plus, Izuku has very close friends that care for him. Izuku still has his mom. People say, like, yeah, All Might was Izuku's father figure in a sense. Well, Izuku does have a dad, and we talked about this in a video. And I can imagine, like, he doesn't get to see his dad very much. That doesn't mean he despises his birth father. But it's like, here's the thing. All Might showed up in his life personally, within the last year or so. So, yeah, he might view him as, like, a father figure, but it's not going to be the same way that Tomura viewed AFO, because they've been together for years and years and years. All Might just kind of showed up in Izuku's life. So, yeah, I think he would be able to hold himself together a little bit more, and then they get to the final battle. Now, how would this battle go? This battle that has been, set up basically ever since the quirk thing began. Like, this is the ultimate showdown of Ultimate Destiny, Is this going to end with just Izuku killing Tomura, and then like, alright, I guess I'm the greatest hero in the world? I took him out, he's gone. No more AFO, no more All for One. I win. Best hero. Is that how this is gonna end? Well, I mean, okay, look, here's the thing. It's always difficult when you're doing, like, this epic final battle, and, it's like, oh, it's decades, centuries in the making, because you're always like to try to spin it in a weird way at the very end of it. I'm gonna make another comparison to Avatar: The Last Airbender here, going back to that. It's like, Aang, you gotta kill the Fire Lord. You gotta kill him. all this crap that happened ever since Roku and Sozin and Azulon and now Ozai. Just, Aang, you got to kill the Fire Lord to end this war and make everything good again. And what do they do at the very end of Avatar? They introduce this new concept of energy bending, which was never really talked about before. Aang just gets this power out of nowhere from a giant lion turtle, and he finishes off Ozai. He figures out another way to get rid of Ozai without actually killing him. All right, now, I liked Avatar. It was a great series, and you know what I've realized? It's like the merits of the series and how we got to that point is what really makes it okay, in my opinion. If Avatar was like a mediocre series, it wasn't great, it wasn't bad, and then at the very end of the series, it's like, oh yeah, Aang, you got this new power, you win without killing him, everything's copacetic. I'd be a little bit more mad about that. But at the end of Avatar, it was such a great ride, it was such a great series, I kind of gave it to him. I'd be like, you know what? With the lessons and all of the different, mythologies that get brought up in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Eastern mythologies and all that stuff, and talk about chakras and everything, Aang getting this energy bending power, it did kind of come out of left field at the very end of it, but I'll let him have it. And so the way that Aang defeated Ozai, I wasn't really upset by it. So, going back to my hero now, if we get down to the final battle between Izuku and Tomura, and the final battle is not just Izuku killing him and then calling it a day, if Izuku figures out some other way to end All For One's reign, I'm not saying they would do it the same way as in Avatar, where it's like Izuku figures out a way to take away All For One out of Tomura. But at that point in the series, I would judge it based on everything up to this point. If Horikoshi does a shit job of building to that point, and it's just like, oh, he has this power all of a sudden, bloop, I win, later. Be like, okay, that's stupid. But we just kind of have to wait and see for that, because I have a feeling that he's not going to do that. I have a feeling like we're not just going to have a straight-up brawl, Izuku wins. I mean, that would be very cathartic to see it, just like, it's over in a bloody finish, knockout by punching Tomura's head to the moon in the 8th round, Izuku Midoriya. That would be rather cathartic, but would it be the way Izuku would really want to win? Would that be the way of just pounding your problems into a bloody pulp on the asphalt? That's how the series wins. That's how it wins. That's how it ends. I don't know. Maybe you'd be cool with that. It would be fun to watch, but at the same time, I think Horikoshi's going to go a little bit different route with it. But if he's not going to go that route with it, and let's just say he's not going to go the Avatar route with it, like absorbing the powers, how else could Izuku manage to end the threat of All For One that was now residing in Tomura? I really hope it doesn't come down to like, Tomura, come on, you don't really want to be a villain, why don't we just be friends and we can work together? I really hope that crap doesn't happen, because, look, man, I'm not saying it's 100% impossible to pull that off, but you gotta do it in a really creative way. To pull the whole, the villain of the series is now your ally all of a sudden, he's swayed over to your side, that is not an easy thing to accomplish. Alright, they tried to do that crap in Naruto, I didn't like it. It takes a really, really good writer to pull that off in any convincing way. Alright, and I'm not saying Horikoshi's a shitty writer, but is he at that level of writer? I don't know. So, I mean, it's up to him. He's the author, he's the mangaka, but yeah. Any other possibilities, let me know, other than ending it with physical violence, somehow removing his quirk so he's no longer a threat, or somehow taking him over to your side. I mean, outside of causing an extreme brain, that might be honestly the most believable way to think of this. Like, Izuku punches Tomura so hard, it causes, like, severe brain injury, and Tomura's, like, he goes into a coma for, like, 2 years, and then he wakes up, and he's like, I'm sorry for all the stuff I did. That was horrible. Why did I ever do that? I think I'm gonna be I'm gonna be an ally to justice from now on. I mean, like, I could buy that. Like, that would be like, all right, so you did kind of solve your problems with physical violence without actually killing him. You know, I don't know. But let me know what you think below on how the final battle would go between Izuku and Tomura and how this whole feud would end and the whole relationship between All Might, All for One, and Tomura and Izuku. Thanks for watching, everybody. Yeah, I'm gonna go edit this and then cuddle up with a nice blanket because it is very cold this time of year. Later, everybody.